He waited 12 years, through rain, snow, and silence, lying on the cold stone of a grave, never understanding why his best friend never came back. The world forgot Sergeant Jimmy Harper, like it forgets too many who serve. But his dog Captain refused to let that memory fade. He brought back the flag, stood guard alone, and did what no system or ceremony ever could. He stayed. But just wait until you hear the heartbreaking turn this story takes, and how, in the end, loyalty became the justice the world needed to see. The morning sky hung low over the Veterans Cemetery in rural Tennessee, cloaked in a pale gray mist that softened every edge and swallowed every sound. There were no birds singing, no wind rustling through the trees, just stillness, the kind that wrapped around you like an old coat that remembered too much. Among the neat, even rows of white marble headstones, one grave was never truly alone. There, lying in the exact same position as the morning before, and the morning before that, for 12 unbroken years, was a yellow Labrador retriever named Captain. His muzzle had long since turned silver, and his back legs no longer moved like they used to. But every day, rain or shine, winter or summer, he returned to that one stone. He didn't cry, he didn't bark, he just lay there, as if guarding something he couldn't let go. The name carved into the headstone was fading slightly from time and rain. James Jimmy Harper, 1982, 2010 Sergeant, U.S. Marines' beloved son. Captain had once arrived fat and bright-eyed all those years ago. Now his ribs showed through his coat, and his eyes held that kind of weight dogs carry when they've loved too deeply for too long. Sometimes he came limping, caked in mud, sometimes soaking wet, as if he'd crossed a river or walked all night in the storm. No one knew exactly where he came from. No one ever followed him. It was as if he simply appeared, with one purpose, one duty that had outlived everything else. Some mornings, he brought a stick clenched gently in his teeth. Other days, it was a faded sock, or a piece of cloth that had no meaning to anyone else. But maybe it had once belonged to Jimmy. He'd drop it by the headstone and curl up beside it, his head resting near the name as if listening for a familiar voice. The cemetery's groundskeeper, Grace, had stopped being surprised by Captain years ago. She'd grown older with him, brought him water in summer, a blanket in the cold. Once tried to coax him into her truck when a blizzard was coming, but he wouldn't move. He just looked at her like he understood her kindness, and gently refused. Then one morning, as frost laced the grass and steam curled from hot coffee in her hand, a boy appeared. He looked no more than 10, skinny with knobby elbows and eyes too serious for his age. He stood near the gate for a long while before he finally walked up to her. His voice was barely above a whisper. Is it true that he was his dog? Grace looked at the boy, then at the dog lying motionless by the grave. She nodded slowly. They were inseparable, she said. Jimmy found him when he was just a stray pup, named him Captain. They went everywhere together, even served together overseas. She stopped. Her voice caught, not because she didn't want to finish, but because she didn't need to. The boy looked at her for a moment, then turned toward the dog. He understood. Sometimes silence tells the whole story. When Jimmy Harper came home from his first deployment in Afghanistan, he looked the same, at least from a distance. Same strong build, same upright posture, same quiet manners. But something inside him had shifted. He didn't laugh like before. He rarely spoke, and when he did, it was brief, like every word had to pass through a storm. His eyes didn't meet yours for long. They stayed restless, scanning the room, as if still watching for something that wasn't there. Only one soul seemed to bring him any peace: Captain. The Labrador would curl up at Jimmy's feet the moment he sat down, placing his head gently on Jimmy's boot. At night, when nothing else could calm him, not the darkened room, not the silence, Captain would climb onto the bed and rest against his chest like a warm shield. Jimmy's parents, Margaret and Tom, tried to understand. They offered help, conversations, prayer. But it was Captain who anchored their son. The dog didn't ask questions. He didn't flinch when Jimmy woke up in cold sweat. He simply stayed close, steady, unmoving. By Jimmy's third tour, this time in Kabul, even Captain had grown more watchful, more alert, as if he sensed what no one wanted to say. Then came the knock on the door. One ambush. One blast. That was all it took. Jimmy didn't make it home. The casket arrived sealed. Folded flag. Quiet orders. Ceremony at sunrise. When the hearse pulled up in front of the house, Captain was inside, asleep under the window. But the second the engine stopped, the dog shot to his feet. Ears up, body tense. He barked once, then bolted through the door before anyone could stop him. He reached the casket before the Marines did, and he wouldn't leave. Not when they asked, not when they pulled. He laid himself over the flag-draped coffin and growled at the world, not with anger, but with grief too deep to name. It took 3 grown men to carry him back inside, but from that day on, Captain vanished. Margaret and Tom searched the neighborhood, put up signs, called shelters. Nothing. 2 nights later, just before dawn, Grace, the cemetery groundskeeper, saw a shape lying on Jimmy's grave. Captain had found his way, and he never left. Not for snow, not for heat, not for time. 12 years. Every single morning, he was there, sprawled across the stone as if trying to keep Jimmy warm beneath the earth. Sometimes his ribs showed through his fur. Sometimes he limped. But he came, and when Margaret visited each Sunday with fresh food and clean water, she'd find the bowls mostly untouched. Captain wasn't there to eat. He was waiting. Over the years, his golden coat turned to ash gray. His body grew thin. His eyes lost brightness, but never focus. He had become the shadow of the man he had once followed, lying vigil like a soldier, standing post long after the war had ended. Then came a brutal winter. For 2 full days, Captain disappeared. Volunteers who'd heard about the story through local news feared the worst. Some cried, others searched the woods. And then, just as quietly as he'd gone, he returned. Dirty, frozen, limping. And in his mouth, clenched gently between his teeth, was a torn, weather-beaten American flag. They later learned it had blown off the pole of a nearby grave during the storm. Captain had tracked it down, carried it across the icy hill, and brought it back. Back to Jimmy, just as any Marine would return the colors to his fallen brother. That morning, Captain didn't come. Grace knew instantly. She called Margaret. Together, they searched the grounds in silence, until they found him. He was lying on Jimmy's grave, head gently resting on the carved name. Peaceful. Still. Captain had passed in his sleep. At the place he had guarded for 12 long years, Margaret knelt beside him and wept, not with panic or noise, but with the quiet heartbreak of someone losing her son all over again. Only this time, it was the one soul who had never left him. A month later, the town placed a bronze statue near the grave, Captain lying as he always had with the words, "Eternal loyalty needs no words." People came, left acorns, dog tags, old medals, drawings. Children wrote essays, veterans sent letters, families just stood quietly and watched. Captain didn't become a legend because he waited. He became one because no one taught him how to love like that. He just did. His loyalty was never about words. It was a choice, made every day, even when it hurt.